The night begins slowly, like breath returning to a tired body. The air drifts through open fields, soft and cool, carrying the faint scent of earth after rain. Somewhere, a window creaks, the last trace of daylight folds into shadow. The world feels older here, not distant, just quiet, as if the hours have forgotten to hurry. In this stillness, you can almost hear the rhythm of old lives, a fire crackling against stone, footsteps pressing into damp soil, a slow voice humming near the hearth. Before machines and wires, before the hum of cities, there was this, the simple heartbeat of survival. Every flicker of flame mattered, every handful of grain, every drop of water, every tool shaped by hand was an answer to the dark. The people who lived here did not think of comfort the way we do now. They built warmth from what they had: moss, wood, clay, breath. Their homes were stitched from patience. Their tools were stories made solid. And when the wind moved across their roofs, it carried the smell of smoke, the promise of safety, and the quiet pride of endurance. Tonight, we walk back into that world. Not to marvel, not to compare, but to rest inside its simplicity. To remember how survival once sounded, the hiss of fire waking from ember, the low hum of water in a clay jar, the whisper of rushes catching light. You don't need to move. Let the weight of the day fall away. Let your breath lengthen, slow and even. The past is not gone. It only waits in the silence, ready to unfold again when the world grows quiet enough to hear it. The medieval night is patient. It does not rush toward meaning or fear. It offers a steady rhythm of sound and scent: smoke, straw, cool air, and faint stars trembling above wooden beams. Here, the lessons of life are small and endless: how to carry fire, how to keep warmth, how to find peace in the work of hands. And as you listen, you may feel the calm that comes from knowing that long before you, others lived, breathed, and rested beneath the same endless sky. Their world is not gone, it only sleeps, and tonight, you can sleep with it. The quiet world before electricity. The night begins softly, unfolding the way a long exhale leaves the body after a day of noise and effort. The air settles across the old fields, slow and unhurried, carrying the faint scent of soil that has been turned by generations of hands, and the quiet sweetness of wood smoke drifting from unseen chimneys. Somewhere, water murmurs through a narrow channel, brushing against smooth stones. Somewhere else, a door closes, its sound muted by straw and distance. The world feels smaller now, bound together by the quiet hum of survival. Nothing shines here, nothing glows with the harsh pulse of invention. The light that exists is tender and alive, shaped by flame, shaped by breath. The horizon fades into dark greens and pale greys, a world caught between waking and sleep. In this place, before wires hummed through walls and glass bulbs conquered night, the rhythm of existence was measured differently. It was not the clock that ruled the hours, but the fire, the wind, the sound of the animals settling down, the slow turning of the sky. Time had a softness to it, a patience that no longer belongs to us. People lived by this gentler order, rising with the faint grey of dawn, working while the air was still cool, retreating into the slow heart of evening as light faded through the trees. There were no interruptions, no sudden brightness to tear the mind from its place. The world was dim, yes, but it was full of texture, of smell, of quiet knowing. You can imagine the cottages scattered across a slope, each one breathing its own thin trail of smoke into the dusk. The air inside is warm and thick with the scent of ash, clay, and wool. A small fire trembles inside the hearth, its glow flickering against rough stone. The floor is earth, cool underfoot. Shadows gather in the corners, gentle and familiar. Somewhere a kettle murmurs over the coals. The sound is soft, not hurried. The heat moves slowly, the way life moves when it has no need to prove its worth. There is comfort here, though it is not luxury. It is a comfort made of effort, of things built by hand, of work that returns warmth when the body can no longer move. Outside, the wind carries the faint rhythm of the night. A dog shifts in its sleep near the door. The fields creak under frost. A tree leans slightly, its branches scratching against the roof, as if testing the patience of time. There are no lamps, only the glow of embers, the pale shimmer of moonlight catching on a puddle near the gate. To live here is to understand the value of a small flame, the difference between silence and the kind that comforts. Even darkness is not empty. It breathes, it folds around the body like a blanket. It hums with hidden life. The people of this world did not think in grand words. Their wisdom was the quiet kind that grew from repetition, lighting the same fire every dawn, stirring the same pot every dusk, repairing the same wall before the cold returned. Their comfort came from rhythm, not novelty. Every task had its pace, every tool its sound. A wooden spoon scraping the inside of a pot, a broom brushing straw, the dull thud of a loaf being cut in half. These were not noises to be ignored. They were the song of living, the low, steady pulse of continuity. You can almost hear it now, the rhythm of hands and tools, the soft breathing of animals in stalls, the whisper of wool being spun by lamplight. It is not a romantic world, it is a patient one. Hunger and cold are near, but so is skill, and the knowledge that enough work, done carefully, will keep both away. The beauty of this life lies not in what it owns, but in how deeply it listens, to the crack of firewood, to the shift of weather, to the slow message of the seasons turning over themselves. The sky above such a world feels closer, without the bright stain of artificial light, stars pressed low and heavy, tracing paths across the same heavens that guided the first fires of humankind. They are not decoration but orientation. To walk beneath them is to feel a kind of belonging that modern light has erased, a sense that the world, though vast, is not separate from the self. The moon climbs over a ridge of black trees, the kind of light that does not demand attention, but grants calm simply by being there. Inside the home, warmth grows stronger as the night deepens. The air smells faintly of stew, of wool, of wood and smoke. The sounds are few, a pot settling, a chair shifting, the soft creak of rope above the bed. Someone adds another piece of wood to the fire, the flames stretching lazily, licking the sides of the hearth. There is no rush. There is no endless list of things undone. Life, in this quiet, becomes circular again. Light the fire, share the meal, rest, and begin. When morning comes, it will arrive without alarm or interruption. A pale light will seep through the cracks of the shutters, touching the wooden floor, the coiled blanket, the bowl on the table. The fire will be stirred back to life with slow patience. The day will move forward again, not because of clocks or commands, but because it always has. This is the world before electricity, slow, deliberate, and near to the body. A place where every small act, lifting a bucket, blowing on coals, mending a wall, belongs to the same unbroken pattern. And as you rest here in this imagined night, you can feel the same steadiness. You can hear the hush of wind over thatch, the sigh of cooling stone, the rhythm of a fire breathing softly through the dark. It is not nostalgia that fills the silence, it is peace. The kind that has no hurry, no noise, no light, but the one you make with your own hands. the kind of peace that asks for nothing more than breath and quiet, the kind that waits, endlessly patient, for you to sleep. The ember you carry. Fire is not a luxury here, it is the heartbeat of everything. In a world without wires or switches, without sparks on demand, fire is breath, memory, and survival woven together. It begins at the hearth, where the slow pulse of orange light trembles through smoke-darkened beams. Every home guards it as one guards a secret. The hearth is never allowed to die completely. Even in sleep, a few coals remain alive beneath the ash, waiting for dawn. When morning comes, the ash is brushed away with careful fingers, and from beneath the pale grey powder, a faint red glow reveals itself. It is the colour of continuation, the colour of life that endures the night. A small breath, a twist of straw, a whisper of dry wood, and the flame returns, stretching, remembering itself. When a traveller must leave the safety of home, they do not leave the fire behind. Instead, they take a part of it with them, a living ember carried in a small bundle. The bundle is simple, a glowing coal wrapped in dry moss or fungus, sometimes tucked into a hollowed horn, sometimes bound in thick linen soaked in animal fat or saltpeter to keep it smouldering longer. It breathes faintly, never bright, never loud, just a slow pulse of warmth that moves with them through wind and rain. In that quiet glow rests comfort, safety, and a promise. Wherever you go, the heart of home still travels with you. Imagine the scene, a narrow path cutting through fields, silvered by mist, the morning light pale and uncertain. A lone figure walks, cloak drawn close, the air damp and sharp. On their belt hangs a small leather pouch. Inside, the ember sleeps pressed between folds of charred cloth. Each step is steady, each movement careful. A stumble, a drop, too much air, and the ember could die. And with it, warmth, food, and safety. The traveller checks it often, feeling for heat through the fabric. It is a quiet ritual, a reassurance that life still burns. By day, the ember rides silently. By night, it becomes a companion. When the traveller finds shelter, a fallen tree, a rocky hollow, a patch of dry ground, they kneel and open the bundle. The moss, darkened and brittle, releases a small breath of smoke. They cup their hands around it, blow gently, and watch the glow deepen. In a moment, thin tongues of flame rise, fragile but alive. A few twigs join, then thicker branches until the small camp fills with the soft music of crackling wood. The light catches the traveller's face, worn and calm. They warm their hands, cook a small meal, and sit in silence while the fire hums softly. It is not just heat they feel, it is the presence of home, carried through distance and solitude. In the medieval world, to keep fire alive was an act of care, as essential as eating or breathing. It meant continuity in a landscape that could turn cruel without warning. It meant safety from the wild, protection against illness, the ability to dry clothes, boil water, cook food, or send smoke into the sky when someone was lost. Villages sometimes shared fire from one hearth to another, passing embers wrapped in linen like gifts of light. In times of storm or flood, when fire went out, it was a quiet panic. People would walk for miles through rain or snow just to borrow a single coal from a neighbour's flame. To share fire was to share survival. You can picture a small cottage at the edge of the forest. The storm has passed, leaving the world drenched and trembling. A woman kneels near the hearth, coaxing life back into the ashes. Her hands are cracked, her eyes tired. She leans close, blows softly, and sees the faint shimmer of red returning. It grows, fragile but certain, until flames rise again and light spills into the room. The walls breathe warmth once more. In this world, that small act is everything, a quiet victory against the vastness outside. Even those who traveled great distances learned to carry their flame carefully. Traders moving between villages tucked embers into horns sealed with clay. Shepherds crossing hills wrapped them in animal fat and bark, hanging them from their belts like talismans. For them, fire was not a tool, it was a companion that slept beside them, that asked for breath but never words. To wake it again at dusk was to begin another small life, one that shimmered against the silence of the world. There were those who became skilled at keeping embers alive for days. They knew the right mosses to use, the exact dampness to allow, the rhythm of breath to feed it without extinguishing the glow. It was not science, it was memory, passed down through repetition, refined through need. A family might preserve the same coal through an entire season, never letting it die, tending it through rain, wind, and long travel. Each spark revived from that coal carried the same lineage of warmth, the same fire that had burned for generations. At night, the light of fire shaped more than warmth. It shaped companionship. The way it flickered against the faces of those who gathered near it made stories possible, made laughter soft, made silence deep. The sound of wood popping, the steady glow dancing on rough walls, all of it turned the world inward. The fire spoke a language older than speech. It connected those around it in ways that no light since has managed. Every spark rose like a thought, bright for a moment, then vanished into the air. Yet none were wasted. They joined the same endless pattern of smoke and breath and heat. When storms came and winds howled through the thatch, the ember's light seemed almost sacred, though no one would have called it so. It was protection that required tending, not worship. It reminded them that nothing stayed alive by accident. It survived through care, through patience, through attention. The fire's glow reflected in the traveller's eyes was not hope in the grand sense, it was simply presence. The knowledge that warmth still existed, that darkness could be softened, that the body could rest again. And when dawn came after the long rain, when mist rolled low across the valley and the birds stirred faintly in the hedgerows, the ember was packed again into its pouch, its faint warmth pressed back into silence. The traveller rose, pulled the cloak tight, and began to walk once more. Behind them, the ashes of last night's fire cooled slowly, returning to earth. Ahead of them, the world stretched quiet and grey. But in the small bundle at their side, fire still lived, breathing softly, waiting to be born again. The ember you carry is more than warmth. It is memory, endurance, and quiet companionship through endless wind and rain. It is the pulse that connects one day to the next, one life to another, one moment of stillness to another. Long after the words are forgotten, long after the footsteps fade, the ember remains, the faintest trace of light, steady in the palm, whispering that even in the vast dark, something small and living still waits for you. Smoke and storage. Smoke moves the way time moves here, slowly, deliberately, without hurry or noise. It drifts upward through the dim interior of the cottage, curling between beams darkened by years of breath and fire. The air carries a low, earthy fragrance, pine resin, oak bark, ash, and the deep, steady scent of meat curing in the rafters. The space above the hearth is crowded with quiet work. Slabs of pork, strips of venison, small fish tied with twine, all hanging in patient rows. They do not cook, they dry. Day after day, the cool smoke passes around them, touches them, leaves its mark. The color of the flesh changes slowly, from pale to deep amber, then to the shade of old wood. The surface hardens, the scent deepens. The transformation is not sudden. It is the rhythm of weeks of waiting, of care. The fire below is not large. It does not roar or flare. It murmurs softly, sending out the right amount of smoke to fill the air without choking it. The wood burns low, a mixture of pine, oak, and juniper, each chosen not for heat, but for what it gives to the meat. Every breath of smoke is both shield and gift, keeping away insects, slowing decay, adding flavor that lingers long after the meal is gone. In the small world of the medieval home, this simple act, letting smoke rise, was a kind of quiet triumph against time. Where others saw cold, they saw preparation. Where others feared hunger, they found a way to wait through it. The room itself is a companion to the process. Walls of wattle and daub breathe with the seasons. Cracks open and close as the air changes. The ceiling is low, trapping the warmth and smoke where it is needed most. Beneath the hanging meat, a table stands close to the fire. On it rest small bundles of salt, pots of rendered fat, and bowls of dried herbs. Nothing is wasted. The same fire that warms the hands of the family also dries their food, hardens their tools, and purifies the air. In a single space, all forms of life and labor meet: flame, wood, flesh, smoke, and patience. Step closer, and you can hear it, the faint hiss as fat drips onto coals, the soft crackle of burning twigs, the occasional sigh of wind pushing through the gaps in the wall. The smoke thickens, then thins again, following invisible currents. It never rushes, it simply exists, always climbing, always working. In its haze, the light of the fire becomes diffused, gentle, almost golden. Dust particles drift through it like slow snow. The air feels heavy but alive, saturated with purpose. For those who live here, the smell is not harsh. It is comfort, it is memory, it is a sign that winter will not find them empty-handed. Outside, the world is cold and still. Frost lies across the ground, silvering the path that leads to the barn. Somewhere in the distance, a crow calls, its sound carried by wind that smells faintly of pine and smoke. Inside, warmth grows layer by layer. A child sleeps near the hearth, wrapped in wool. A pot simmers low beside the embers, filled with broth and roots. The smoke curls above, weaving its way between every object, softening edges, blurring the boundary between air and structure. This is not just storage, it is preservation in its purest sense, a conversation between fire and flesh, between patience and survival. When a piece of meat has hung long enough, it is brought down, wiped clean, and stored in cool places, sometimes in wooden boxes lined with ash, sometimes wrapped in cloth and hung in root cellars below the floor. There it will rest for weeks or months, waiting for the time when fields sleep and hunger sharpens. The smoke has already done its work, keeping away the unseen, binding the air with its dry touch. It has turned something fragile into something enduring. And when, on a dark winter's evening, a knife slices through that dried meat, the smell of the hearth returns again, as if summer itself had been captured and held inside the fibers. Every household has its own rhythm. Some use smokehouses built apart from the main home, small huts of stone or timber where fires burn day and night through the early winter. Others use the hearth itself, letting the same fire that cooks the meal preserve the next one. It is not about taste, it is about assurance. Smoke is their promise, a way of saying, tomorrow we'll have food, even if the ground outside is frozen and the animals have long since gone to shelter. It is a slow, invisible labor, requiring no movement, no noise, only the passage of time and the breath of fire. There is a wisdom in this patience. The people who tended these fires did not measure time by the clock, but by color and scent. They knew when the wood was too green, when the air was too damp, when the smoke burned too sharp. They watched, adjusted, waited. Every decision was a quiet negotiation with the elements, a kind of trust in nature's slow cooperation. To watch smoke rise, to feed it gently, to smell when it changed. These were forms of knowledge as real as reading or writing. And through them, families endured. Even after generations, the scent of smoke would cling to everything, the walls, the clothes, the hair. To outsiders it might seem heavy or harsh, but to those who lived within it, it was simply home. It was the smell of meals yet to come, of the assurance that warmth and food could always be found where smoke still drifted. In that fragrance, life itself felt steady, grounded, complete. Smoke was not pollution. It was memory, alive in the air. And so in the quiet rhythm of days and nights, smoke became the unseen hand that carried them through the year. Each thread of it rising from the hearth was a bridge between work and rest, between the living and what sustained them. Even when no one watched, it moved, steady, soft, endless. It climbed into rafters, wrapped itself around the food they'd made, and disappeared through the roof to join the grey sky beyond. The world outside might be cold, the fields hard and still, but inside there was the scent of survival, faint and constant, curling upward forever. The smoke fades only when morning comes, when sunlight begins to fill the small windows with pale gold, yet its mark remains, woven into every beam and breath. It lingers long after the fire is gone, carrying the quiet promise that what was made with care will last, that warmth and nourishment can live within patience. And in that patient air, in that dim, fragrant quiet, the house itself breathes, a living shelter against time, with smoke rising like a memory that never forgets. Living walls of willow and thorn. Across the open fields, the land divides itself not with stone or iron, but with life. From a distance, the hedgerows seem like gentle shadows drawn across the countryside, low, uneven, breathing lines that follow the slow curves of the earth. Up close, they are something else entirely, woven barricades of willow and thorn, each branch intertwined with another, each root gripping the soil as if to anchor the world in place. The air here smells of wet leaves and old bark. When the wind moves, the hedge whispers, the sound neither human nor wild, but something in between, a quiet pulse of endurance. Before the age of fences and sharp geometry, people learned to build boundaries that grew instead of decayed. A wall of living wood did not need nails or mortar. It needed only time and care. In early spring, when the ground was soft and the sap began to rise, men and women would walk the edges of their fields carrying bundles of young willow, hazel, and hawthorn. They planted the shoots in a single line, close together, bending them before they hardened, weaving one into another, pressing them down with bare hands and simple stakes. The process took hours, sometimes days, but it was quiet work. There was no clang of metal, no shout or rush. Only the rhythm of breath, the push of soil against root, the soft thud of footsteps in mud. As the seasons turned, the shoots thickened, took hold, and reached upward. The fence became alive in every sense, a network of green veins drinking from the rain. In summer, it shimmered with leaves that caught light like water. In autumn, it burned gold and copper. In winter, stripped bare, it showed its skeleton of interlocking limbs. Over years, what began as pliant branches hardened into structure, forming a wall dense enough to stop a bull, high enough to shield crops from wind. Beneath its canopy, small lives flourished, Birds nested deep within, hedgehogs burrowed at its base, bees hummed through its blossoms when the air warmed again. The wall was not separation, it was coexistence. It kept life in and life out, but never entirely apart. Walk along one of these living fortresses and you would see the history of hands within it. Old cuts where a branch had been laid down and guided sideways, twisted joints where bark healed over old wounds. Every section bore marks of decisions made in different years, layers of care written in wood. Farmers returned each spring to relay the hedge, cutting and weaving new growth into the old, bending young stems low to thicken the base, pruning away what had grown too wild. The work required patience. Nothing could be forced. If cut too deeply, the plant would die. If left too long, it would lose its shape. The skill lay in listening to the wood, in knowing how much to guide and how much to allow. Beyond its practical strength, the hedge was beauty. In morning light, dew beaded along its branches like threads of glass. In the stillness of dusk, it shimmered faintly as the last light folded into shadow. Travelers moved along paths lined with these green walls, their footsteps softened by grass. The world felt enclosed, intimate, yet open to the sky. No two hedges were ever the same. Each one grew according to soil, sun, and the quiet hand that shaped it. Over generations, they became landmarks, memory lines across the landscape. A child could find their way home by the shape of a particular curve in the hedge, or by the place where the birds always gathered when rain was near. For the people of this time, such walls were more than boundaries. They were instruments of balance. They kept animals safe, guided streams, divided crops, and softened the violence of the wind. When storms came down from the north, the hedges bent but did not break, their roots gripping deep. In the days after, they stood untouched, holding the soil in place, protecting the life behind them. Even the fields seemed to breathe differently within their shelter, growing greener where the wind could not strip the moisture away. The farmers knew this, not from study, but from living beside it. Knowledge here was not written. It was felt through the soles of feet, through the motion of seasons, through the sound of branches shifting in the dark. Sometimes, during long winters, the hedges slept under frost, their thorns rimed with white, their shadows faint on the pale ground. Birds huddled within, invisible, except for the occasional flick of a wing. The people stayed close to their fires, but even then, the living fences stood guard outside, marking the edges of what was known and safe. When spring came, the first green shoots appeared before anything else, tiny signs that life still pulsed beneath the cold skin of the world. To see that green was to feel reassurance. The land still held its promise. Even in silence, the hedge spoke of time. It grew older as the families beside it grew older, its roots entwined with their history. Children who once ran along its edge would later mend it as adults, teaching their own children the same slow craft. It was a lineage of patience, passed hand to hand, generation to generation. And when someone died, their field remained bordered by the same hedge they had tended, living on without them, breathing with the same quiet rhythm as before. There is a softness in such endurance. The hedge never rushes, never competes. It does not seek perfection. It survives through adaptability, through the calm persistence of growth. When cut, it heals. When bent, it learns to lean. When left alone, it expands outward, filling space until it becomes both boundary and habitat. Its lesson is simple but deep. Strength does not need force, it only needs time. Now, centuries later, many of those same hedgerows still trace the outlines of forgotten fields. The farms they once guarded have crumbled, the names of their keepers erased, yet the walls remain, silent, breathing, green. If you stand beside one today, the air still hums with the same quiet life. Insects drifting in the shade, birds darting through, roots still clinging to the soil that remembers every footprint. In the hush of wind through thorn and willow, you can almost hear them, the hands that planted, the patience that tended, the generations that trusted growth more than control. The living wall stands as both shelter and story, a green seam stitching land to sky. No hammer strikes, no nails rust, no sound interrupts its slow endurance. Only the endless rhythm of growth, the whisper of leaves, the murmur of roots, the breathing of the earth itself. A boundary not of separation, but of belonging, where time gathers quietly in the spaces between thorns, and the land remembers what it means to endure. Clay, stone, and the art of coolness. In the quiet heart of the medieval home, clay and stone were not decoration, but understanding made solid. The people who lived here knew how to listen to the language of earth, its warmth, its weight, its patience. Clay held temperature the way memory holds time. It remembered the heat of fire and the chill of night, and in that memory lay its usefulness. Unglazed pots stood in the corners of rooms, cool to the touch, their surfaces breathing gently through tiny pores invisible to the eye. When filled with water or milk, a faint dampness spread across their skin. The moisture evaporated slowly, drawing away heat and leaving what was inside fresh and cool. In a world without glass or machines, this was science lived through instinct, a partnership between human hands and the calm logic of nature. You can imagine the small kitchen at dawn, the faint light touching the curve of an earthen jar. Its color is soft brown, darkened near the rim where hands have lifted it hundreds of times. Inside, water rests silent, holding the chill of the night before. The air is still. Somewhere outside, a rooster calls and footsteps stir on the floor above. The pot does not react. It simply holds, doing the same work it has done for years, never changing its purpose, never asking to be more than what it is. The coolness inside it is not a trick. It is the quiet exchange between clay and air, between the porous and the passing. In summer, these pots were essential. Milk soured quickly, bread turned stale, and meat spoiled in the heat. But water stored in clay stayed pure, almost sweet, as though filtered through the memory of soil. Some jars were buried halfway into the ground to keep them colder still, resting among stones that held the night's breath. Around them, the house remained warm, yet the water within stayed untouched. The same clay that baked bread in the morning cooled it in the evening. Its nature was balance. Where fire hardened it, air softened it again. Stone, too, held this quiet genius. It was the house's skeleton, unmoving, uncomplaining, endlessly patient. The walls, built of limestone or slate, breathed more than one might think. In winter, when the hearth blazed for hours, the stone absorbed its heat, storing it deep inside. When the fire died, that warmth drifted out slowly, a ghost of heat that lasted until dawn. In summer, the same walls turned cold, refusing to hold the day's fever, offering their chill to whoever brushed against them. Each surface of stone understood moderation. It never rushed to change, never yielded to the extremes of the world outside. Many cottages had shelves carved directly into the stone, cool recesses where milk, butter, and cheese could rest safely even when the air outside grew heavy with warmth. The stone remained cold long after the sun had climbed high. A jug placed there at sunrise would still be cool to the touch by noon. There was no need for ice, no sound of machines, only the quiet collaboration of material and time. The builders of these homes may never have known the words for thermal mass or conduction, but they knew the feeling of it in their bones. They knew which stones to place near the hearth, which to keep in shadow, which to line the cellar walls. The floors were often packed clay, smoothed by countless steps. They held the memory of every foot that crossed them, bare, booted, young, old. In winter, straw was laid across them for warmth. In summer, they were swept clean to let the coolness rise. The sensation of bare feet on the cold floor at dawn was not discomfort, but grounding, a reminder of the earth beneath, of life's unchanging foundation. Even in their simplicity, these materials taught a form of mindfulness, that balance comes not from adding, but from allowing, from letting each element do what it was meant to do. The hearth, of course, was the house's heart, and clay circled it in every form. Tiles, pots, jars and bricks. When fire burned through the long nights of frost, the clay surrounding it absorbed that life, the same way skin absorbs sunlight. When the flames dwindled, the stored warmth lingered, radiating gently. The people would sit near it long after the last spark faded, feeling the ghost of heat moving through the walls. Children slept close to it, wrapped in wool, their dreams tinted by the scent of smoke and baked earth. The same clay that protected them from the cold by night would cool their milk by morning. There was a harmony here, an unspoken contract between the living and the material. Stone and clay were not possessions, they were companions. They responded to touch, to weather, to time. They aged with the family, growing smoother where hands rested often, darkening where smoke kissed them again and again. Every mark told a story of use, of belonging. The people never polished these surfaces to shine. They let them be what they were, rough, imperfect, but alive in their purpose. Sometimes, in the heat of midday, when work stopped and silence filled the rooms, the house itself seemed to breathe. The stone exhaled cool air from its depths, the clay released the damp scent of soil after rain. It was like stepping into a shaded cave, away from the bright, relentless sun. In that stillness, everything slowed. The pulse of the day softened. You could rest your palm on the wall and feel the faint echo of the earth's temperature, steady and eternal. When evening came, the same house transformed again. The fire was lit, the walls warmed, the stone shelves gave up their chill, and the clay pots filled once more with water to drink. There was no waste, no division between warmth and coolness, only the constant rhythm of exchange. What held heat today would hold cold tomorrow. What stored life in one season preserved it in another. Every surface, every object knew its role in the great balance of existence. This art of coolness was never taught in words. It was learned through living, through the touch of hands on damp clay, through the patience of watching water stay clear in the heat, through the feeling of warmth radiating from stone when the night had grown dark. It was an art without artist, an elegance born of necessity. Clay, stone, air, and fire all shared the same small space, learning to coexist as quietly as the people who depended on them. And so, when morning light spread once again across the stone walls and the cool pots waiting by the hearth, nothing seemed new, nothing seemed old. Everything was simply continuing, heat passing to clay, coolness returning to stone, breath to air, and silence to all. It was the steady rhythm of balance, the patient intelligence of the earth itself, teaching those who listened that comfort is not created by force, but found in harmony. The house, the clay, the stone, all of it held the same truth. Warmth that lingers, coolness that endures, and peace that asks for nothing but time. Bottom of form, top of form. The work of hands. In the quiet rhythm of the medieval day, everything that lasted was made by hand. There were no factories, no endless noise of metal shaping metal, no hum of machines, only the steady cadence of human effort, soft, persistent, unhurried. The sound of clay being shaped, of straw pressed into mud, of wood bending under pressure. These were not grand works, but everyday acts of survival that, when seen closely, carried a kind of grace. The home, the pot, the chair, the wall, each bore the marks of fingers, palms, and tools that had worn smooth through repetition. Nothing here was perfect, yet everything belonged. The world was built one gesture at a time. You can imagine it now, a woman seated near the doorway, her hands coated in clay. She works slowly, shaping a pot on her lap, turning it just enough to keep the curve even. The air smells faintly of earth and smoke. Light from the small window falls across her arms, catching the thin film of moisture that glistens on her skin. When the pot is formed, she picks up a smooth river stone and begins to polish its surface. The motion is quiet, circular, almost meditative. The stone glides over the clay again and again until it begins to shine faintly, a dull reflection of the light above. Each stroke hardens the surface, compressing the tiny pores, making it more resistant to the heat of fire, to the stains of use. It is slow work, but she does not measure time. Her patience is part of the craft. Around her, other forms of creation continue. A man weaves thin branches into a frame for a wall, bending them while they are green so they will not break. The pattern grows from repetition, horizontal, vertical, diagonal, each strand locked within another. When the frame is complete, a mixture of mud, straw, and dung is pressed into it by hand, sealing the gaps, smoothing the surface. The wall takes shape, not in an instant, but over hours, the texture changing with every pass of a palm. When it dries, it will be as strong as stone and yet alive, breathing faintly, moving with the seasons. This is not architecture born of design, it is architecture born of necessity and rhythm. The home becomes an extension of its maker, part earth, part patience, part memory. Nothing made here is silent when touched. The grain of wood hums under the fingers. The clay cools the palm, then warms with body heat. Even the straw in the walls crackles softly when pressed. To build something by hand is to enter a conversation with materials, to listen to what they can and cannot do. The people who lived this way did not think of themselves as artists, yet art is what they practiced. An art so ordinary, it became invisible. Each object carried the story of its making, each imperfection proof of the human who shaped it. There is a beauty in the roughness. A pot may wobble slightly on the table, a wall may curve unevenly where the frame bent, but these flaws are not failure, they are signature. They tell of care, of trial, of time spent close to the material world. Perfection, after all, is a kind of absence, a thing untouched by hands. Here, touch is everything. A mother's fingerprint may remain faintly on the rim of a bowl long after she has gone. A thumbprint pressed into drying clay becomes both decoration and memory, a quiet declaration that someone once stood here, working, breathing, existing. Inside these homes, nearly everything has been touched into being. The table, roughly hewn from oak, still bears the grooves of the adze that shaped it. The stools wobble slightly but hold firm. The floor, beaten smooth by bare feet, shines faintly in the firelight. Each thing has been used so long it has taken on the warmth of its owner. The bowl remembers the hand that held it. The door remembers every push. In this world, comfort is not bought, it is made, and it is made again every season, repaired, rebuilt, renewed. Outside, the same hands work differently. They mend fences, patch roofs, twist ropes from hemp. The air smells of hay and sweat, of tools rubbed with oil to keep them from rusting. There is rhythm even in the smallest movement, the swing of an axe, the scrape of a spade, the pull of a net. Each task repeats day after day until the body knows it better than the mind. In this repetition lies a form of peace, a merging of self and purpose, a life measured not by achievement but by continuity. To live by the work of hands is to understand time differently. A single pot may take hours to shape, days to dry, another day to fire. A wall may need to be built slowly, layer by layer, waiting for each section to harden. The reward is not speed, but endurance. Things made this way last because they were given attention, not haste. There is something tender in that, the belief that time, when shared with material, gives back strength. At dusk, when the day's labor ends, the house glows with the faint sheen of use. The walls hold the warmth of the sun, the pots cool slowly on the shelves, the scent of clay and straw fills the air. A hand passes over a finished bowl, testing its smoothness, tracing its edge as if confirming its belonging. The maker does not speak pride aloud, but it is there. In the steadiness of the breath, in the way the bowl is set down carefully, not as an object but as something alive. Generations will follow and still use these same things. They will cook in the same pot, repair the same wall, rest their hands where others once did. Each touch adds another layer of history, another echo of life. Over centuries, the work of hands becomes the memory of a people, their houses, their tools, their fields, all shaped by effort so constant it disappears into the background of existence. Yet it is this invisible labor that holds everything together. The world built by hands is not perfect, but it is whole. It breathes with the warmth of its makers. Every mark, every groove, every uneven edge stands as proof that comfort can indeed be made from soil and rhythm alone. The hand, after all, is both the first and last tool. It molds, it repairs, it blesses through creation. When night falls and the fires burn low, the hands rest at last, but even then, their work remains all around, glowing faintly in the stillness, whispering the same ancient truth that everything touched with care endures. Sounds that guide the lost. When the fog settles thick across the fields, the world folds into itself. Shapes dissolve, colors vanish, and distance becomes uncertain. What remains is sound. It is the thread that keeps the traveler tethered to the living world when sight has gone blind. In this pale silence, bells become language, footsteps become orientation, and the faint echo of a dog's bark carries the promise of warmth somewhere beyond the mist. The medieval night was not empty. It breathed with a soft, invisible rhythm, a hum of wind, the ring of metal, the murmur of life continuing unseen. In the earliest hours, when even the stars hide, church bells drift through the air. Their tones roll slowly across the valleys, stretching over forests and marshes, over the sleeping roofs of villages. To the traveller, lost in the fog, they are both comfort and compass. A single bell could mean sanctuary, another could signal danger. The people learned the voices of their bells the way one learns the sound of a friend's call. The deep note from the abbey meant safety. The smaller chime from the town's edge marked the marketplace. Each tower had its sound, each valley its echo. To follow the right one was to find your way home. Cowbells joined the symphony, scattered like stars across the unseen fields. Their tones were irregular, soft, hollow, and oddly calming. They told you the herd was near, that human hands were not far away. Shepherds moved through the haze, guided not by sight but by sound, following the soft clinking ahead of them, adjusting their steps to match the rhythm of animals grazing just out of view. The world in fog was made of invisible distances, measured only by how long an echo took to return. To live in such a world was to listen deeply, to trust your ears more than your eyes, to move slowly and let sound lead you. Along forest paths, wind chimes and clappers hung from trees, left there by travellers who had gone before. Each one spoke differently, a hollow wooden note for the east road, a faint metal shimmer for the path toward the river. When the wind stirred, these small voices marked the way, reminding those who wandered that someone had once found their path safely too. The sound of a clapper swinging lightly in the fog was more than direction. It was reassurance. It told you that the road had meaning even when you could not see it. In the villages, blacksmiths often worked before dawn, their hammers striking in slow, steady rhythm. That sound, faint but firm, carried across fields like a heartbeat. For the traveller returning from a distant errand, it was a beacon in the dark, an unspoken message that civilization still burned somewhere ahead. Dogs barked in reply, geese hissed, doors creaked, and the sounds knitted together into a faint map of human life, each noise a coordinate, each echo a clue. To follow these traces was to move not by compass, but by faith in sound itself. Even the rivers spoke. When fog thickened near the water, you could tell how close you were by the tone of the current. The deeper the rush, the nearer the crossing. Ferrymen kept horns by their boats, blowing long, low notes into the mist. The echo folded and returned, softened by the moisture in the air. That single sound could save a traveller from walking into the river unseen. To hear it was to know where the edge of the world began. At night, taverns and inns served as the final lights of sound, the faint rise of laughter, the muffled rhythm of a lute, the murmur of people telling stories by the hearth, all drifted into the street like a gentle signal. It meant food, shelter, safety. A weary traveller could follow that melody through the dark, step by step, until the glow of firelight met them halfway. Even joy had a sound that guided the lost. For those who worked the land, sound was a measure of survival. A farmer could tell the weather by the tone of the wind, by how it moved through the reeds or whistled across the thatch. A sharper pitch meant frost, a deeper one warned of rain. At sea, sailors read the creak of their ships, the flutter of canvas, the hiss of waves against the hull. Every noise was instruction, every silence a kind of warning. The world itself spoke. The living simply had to remember how to listen. In this way, medieval life was not silent, it was orchestral. Without machines or engines, every sound came from something alive or moving under human touch. The clang of a blacksmith's hammer, the thud of bread dough on wood, the crackle of logs, the creak of a cartwheel, all blended into a language older than words. People were never far from one another if they could still hear each other. The ring of a bell, even faint, meant that someone else existed in the fog, that you were not alone in the great quiet of the world. Sometimes, when the mist was thickest and even sound seemed muted, travellers learned to make noise of their own. They clapped their hands, called out softly, struck sticks together, or dragged a blade along stone to hear its echo. The sound came back thinner, weaker, but enough to tell them distance, to tell them that there was space still left to cross. In those moments, navigation became less about direction and more about connection. Every step, answered by an echo, was a conversation between person and world, between fear and the calm patience of sound. And so, through centuries of nights and fogs, bells and echoes guided the lost home. Their tones became part of memory, inherited like a language. Even now, when cities hum with 1,000 artificial noises, the sound of a bell across misty air still stirs something ancient. It reminds us that before maps and lights and signs, We were guided by simpler things, rhythm, repetition, the hum of existence. The world hums softly as it always has, carrying those who listen through the fog back toward the faint warmth of their own doors. Sleep and the scent of herbs. When night arrives, it comes slowly, settling over the village like a soft blanket, carrying with it the scent of smoke, soil, and something faintly green. Inside the small houses, fires dim to embers, and the world prepares for rest. The beds are simple frames of wood, their shapes uneven from years of use. Upon them lie sacks of straw, dry, rustling, alive with the faint crackle of stems shifting under weight. Yet this straw is never plain. It is mixed with the gentle strength of herbs, lavender for calm, mint for clarity, wormwood for protection. Each handful was gathered by hand, dried beneath eaves, and saved carefully through the summer months. When the time for sleep comes, the herbs are crushed slightly between palms before being added to the bed, their scents awakening as though remembering sunlight. The smell fills the small room, cool, sharp, and sweet all at once. Lavender hums softly in the air, its fragrance pressing against the quiet like a lullaby that doesn't need words. Mint lingers lower, green and alive, touching the senses with freshness even as the body sinks into weariness. Wormwood is the grounding note, bitter and dry, carrying with it the whisper of safety, its ancient promise to drive away insects and dreams that wander too restlessly. Together these scents weave a boundary between the waking world and the sleeping one. The bed becomes more than a place of rest. It becomes a field, a garden reborn each night within 4 wooden walls. When the first body lies down, the sound is a slow sigh, the straw shifting, and the herbs releasing another wave of fragrance. The texture beneath is uneven but forgiving. Each movement stirs the air, carrying small bursts of scent upward. Even the floor plays its part. Herbs are strewn across it too, rushes, thyme and meadowsweet, replaced often to keep the air clean and soft. As feet move across them, their oils rise gently, filling the space with freshness that blurs the line between indoors and outdoors. A house filled with herbs smells not like luxury, but like life, a small garden that blooms in darkness. In these homes, sleep does not arrive with silence alone, but with the language of scent. The nose becomes the night's compass. Lavender says it is safe to rest. Mint reminds the body that the day is done. Wormwood keeps away what should not enter. Long before the idea of comfort was tied to softness or warmth, it was tied to smell, to the reminder that the world outside still cared for those within. The people trusted what grew in the soil around them to soothe their breath, to guard their dreams, to make night less heavy. Outside, the world cools quickly. Dew gathers on grass and the scent of damp earth seeps through the cracks in the walls. Somewhere far away, a dog barks once, and then there is only quiet. Inside, the fragrance of herbs mixes with the faint smoke that lingers from the hearth. It is not unpleasant. It is the scent of survival, of home, of nights lived and nights still to come. The mixture of ash, mint, and lavender becomes almost holy in its simplicity, wrapping itself around sleep like invisible cloth. Each herb has its own story. Lavender was gathered at midsummer when the air was thick with bees. The women cut it in long bundles, tied with twine, and hung it upside down in the rafters until the purple faded to grey-blue. Mint was found near the streams, its leaves cool even in heat, its roots threading deep into wet soil. Wormwood was harder to love, its leaves silvery and bitter, but it was kept in every home, a plant that knew how to keep unwanted guests both living and unseen, at bay. When these herbs came together in a bed, they carried the scent of seasons with them, sunlight, water, frost, and smoke, all folded into the fabric of rest. The night stretches long, but it does not feel empty. In the dark, people shift quietly in their sleep, stirring the straw, renewing the fragrance. Dreams drift like mist above the beds, soft and formless. The room breathes, the herbs breathing too, their scent rising, falling, steady as the pulse of the sleeping world. The fire gives its last small sigh, a red flicker against the wall, and the smoke's last curl joins the green perfume in the air. Somewhere in the rafters, a bird rustles, and then the silence deepens again. The scent of herbs is more than comfort, it is continuity. Each night repeats the same ritual: replace a handful of straw, crush new leaves, scatter a few more rushes on the floor. Every act is both ordinary and sacred. The same motions done for centuries link the living to those who came before. The scent becomes inheritance. Children fall asleep surrounded by the same smell their grandparents once knew, their bodies trusting it without thought. It is a kind of unspoken memory passed through air, reminding them that peace can be handmade. By the deep hours, when dreams have settled fully and the night air has cooled to its quietest, the scent of herbs becomes almost invisible. It blends with the natural breath of the room, the faint musk of straw, the sweetness of wood, the whisper of clean smoke. What remains is only calm. The body grows heavy, the mind light. In this stillness, the world outside fades away. There is no fear of the unknown, no noise, no glare, only the familiar perfume of safety and time. When dawn finally comes, it arrives gently. The first light filters through cracks in the shutters, touching the herbs scattered on the floor. Their scent, faint now, still lingers, green, dry, enduring. The straw creaks softly as the sleepers stir. The air smells of morning and of last night's comfort, still alive in the fabric of the room. The herbs have done their work quietly, asking for nothing. They have kept the peace, held back the dark, and guided weary bodies through the long passage of night. And so, as each new day begins, the scent remains, a reminder that rest is something grown, not given. The bed, the straw, the herbs, the air, they all belong to the same slow rhythm of care. The world outside may change, but inside these walls, the fragrance of sleep endures, a quiet garden blooming until dawn. The subtle science of preservation. In a world without engines or electricity, the act of keeping something from decay was both wisdom and reverence. Nothing was wasted, nothing taken for granted. The people of that quiet age lived by the rhythm of what they could preserve, what could endure the sun, the frost, the silence between harvests. Preservation was not invention, it was understanding. It was the knowledge that earth, water, and air already held the secrets of balance, if one learned how to listen. The science of their days was not written in books but carried in gestures, repeated until they became instinct. Deep beneath the wet peatlands, butter slept in darkness. Wrapped in layers of bark or cloth, sealed with care, it was lowered into the bog where the air could not reach it. There, beneath the surface, time slowed. The cool, oxygen-starved water preserved what the fire had churned, holding it firm and untouched for months. The butter would emerge again when food grew scarce, pale and solid, still carrying the faint scent of earth and moss. It was not just a trick of nature, it was trust. To bury food was to believe in the patience of the land, to let nature keep watch when human hands could not. Elsewhere, the forest became another kind of larder, Hollow trees, their centers softened by time, became storage for apples, grains, and small bundles of dried herbs. The air inside was damp, but still protected from sunlight and from animals. Food hidden this way rested quietly, almost forgotten until it was needed. Sometimes travelers would leave small offerings in such hollows, an apple, a handful of dried meat, a crust of bread, knowing that someone else, lost or hungry, might one day find it. The forest in this way became a living pantry, a memory shared among strangers. Inside the home, the same intelligence continued. Salted fish hung from rafters, their silver scales dulled by time. Vegetables were packed in layers of ash or straw to keep them dry. Fruit was boiled into thick syrup, stored in clay jars sealed with wax. Each method was a conversation with decay, a way of slowing the inevitable, of turning fleeting life into endurance. There was no hurry in these acts, only patience. To preserve was to acknowledge mortality, to say quietly, not yet. Light itself was treated with the same care. Candles were costly, so people made rushlights, thin reeds dipped in animal fat, burning with narrow, steady flames. They gave little light, but enough. A single rushlight could last the length of an evening meal, its slow burn marking the passage of time more gently than any clock. When it was gone, the darkness returned, not as fear, but as rest. These small flames taught moderation. Brightness should be earned, not consumed. The night was not something to banish, only to share. The same spirit of patience guided healing. A leaf of cabbage pressed against a wound drew out heat and soothed the skin. Honey sealed cuts, milk softened burns, and vinegar cleaned what could not be washed with pure water. There was no separation between medicine and nourishment. Both came from the same soil, the same understanding. Knowledge passed quietly from one mouth to another, never written, always remembered. To heal was to observe the color of a leaf, the warmth of a fever, the sound of a breath. The body, like the land, revealed its needs to those who listened. This way of life was full of small experiments, each one guided by intuition rather than theory. The people did not name their science, but they lived within it. They learned that food lasted longer when kept near running water, that cool clay walls prevented spoilage, that smoke could turn meat into memory. Their discoveries were humble yet precise, born of centuries of repetition. They watched the world and did not hurry to correct it. They simply joined its rhythm. The bog, the tree, the hearth, the jar, each was part of a single system, a world that stored its own wisdom. The air that dried the herbs also carried their fragrance into sleep. The same peat that preserved butter also warmed homes in winter. Even decay had its role. What rotted returned to soil, feeding the next season's growth. Preservation, then, was not defiance but harmony, a way of letting life stretch further without demanding permanence. You can picture it now, a cottage at dusk, its air rich with the scent of smoke, salt, and drying herbs. A woman kneels beside a clay jar, sealing it with wax she has melted over the fire. A man lifts a wooden lid from the cellar, checking the barrels below. Children hang rushes by the hearth, their laughter faint and warm. Outside, the fog curls low over the fields and the last birds call to one another before sleep. Every motion here is quiet, deliberate, part of a chain that links survival to patience. When morning comes, the house smells of earth and time. The jars line the shelves like sentinels. The butter in the bog still sleeps. The hollow trees still guard their secrets. Even the rushlights, now extinguished, leave behind a thin trail of ash, a reminder that their small brightness once existed. The people wake to begin again, their world unchanged but always enduring. They do not hurry because they have learned that everything, light, food, warmth, life, can last a little longer if tended with care. And so preservation becomes more than necessity. It becomes philosophy, a quiet science of balance, of knowing that the secret to endurance is gentleness, not struggle. To preserve is to honor the fragile, to respect the slow. It is the art of keeping what matters safe from the noise of time. And long after their names are forgotten, the wisdom of their hands remains. Butter beneath the bog, herbs hanging in air, the faint ring of a rush light marking the quiet minutes of another patient night. Bark bread and the long patience of life. When the harvest fails and the granaries grow hollow, when snow stays longer than it should, and the earth hardens beneath the weight of hunger, the people turn again to the forest. It waits there, quiet and enduring as it always has, holding within its bark the final mercy of sustenance. In these seasons of scarcity, the trees become both shelter and meal. Bark is peeled carefully from pine and birch, stripped in long curls, then dried near the hearth until it hardens and cracks. Later, it is ground between stones into a rough powder, pale as ash and smelling faintly of resin. Mixed with a little water, a trace of flour, or even crushed roots, it becomes dough. The bread it yields is thin, bitter, and dark, but it is enough. This bread carries the taste of endurance. Each bite is sharp and earthy, a reminder of roots, of the patience of trees. It fills the stomach without joy, but with quiet gratitude. In times of famine, to eat at all is to remember that survival is not a promise but a practice, a long conversation between body and world. Those who make bark bread know this deeply. They do not curse the bitterness, they respect it. It speaks of what is real, the taste of life stripped to its simplest form, the quiet strength of those who refuse to disappear. The process itself is slow, deliberate, and silent. The bark must be gathered from trees that still live, for dead wood holds only decay. Each strip is cut thinly so that the trunk may heal again in spring. Even hunger does not break the pact between humans and the earth. There is restraint, a mutual understanding. The forest gives what it can. The people take only what they must. Around the fire, the smell of burning pine mingles with the scent of drying bark. The sound is faint, a crack, a hiss, the low sigh of moisture leaving wood. Time seems to stop here, stretched thin like the dough itself. When the bread is ready, it is baked on flat stones, laid near the edge of the coals. The heat darkens it quickly, curling the edges, leaving patterns like the rings of the trees it came from. The first bite is rough. It scratches the tongue, then softens. There is salt if fortune allows, but often there is not. Still the warmth spreads through the chest, and for a moment the ache of hunger loosens. This is the long patience of life, not sweetness, not comfort, but endurance, shaped by care. Outside, the world is frozen in stillness. Snow gathers against the doorframe. The forest stands motionless, branches heavy, their black silhouettes barely moving against the sky. Smoke rises straight into the air, unbroken. Inside, the small fire glows, its light trembling against walls of clay and straw. Someone breathes softly, perhaps humming, perhaps praying, though no words are needed. The day's labor is done. The bark bread rests cooling on the table beside a bowl of broth, thin as memory. The scent of it fills the small space, faint but grounding, wood and warmth, and the reminder that hunger will not have the final word. This way of living teaches a quiet humility. The people who endured these winters learned to see value where others would see only desperation. Every handful of bark, every scrap of grain, every coal of fire was honored as though it carried spirit. They knew that comfort was not the measure of life, continuity was. What mattered was that breath followed breath, that warmth could be found again tomorrow. Even the act of eating became a kind of prayer, not in words, but in attention, to texture, to taste, to gratitude. The bitterness of bark bread was not punishment, it was memory. It reminded them of the forests that had fed them, the ancestors who had survived harsher seasons, and the hands that still worked even when the body trembled from cold. Children, too young to understand the meaning of famine, learned it through touch and smell. They watched their mothers grind the bark, heard the dull scrape of stone against stone, saw the faint dust rising into light. They did not cry for sweetness. They learned early that life could be both bitter and kind. They learned that the same tree that gave shade in summer could give food in winter. And when they grew older, they would tell the story not as tragedy, but as strength. The taste of bark bread became part of the lineage, a reminder of what endurance costs and what it preserves. As the night deepens, the fire softens. The last embers glow with a calm that seems almost eternal. The air grows cool, carrying the faint scent of pine and ash. Someone leans back, eyes closing, the heaviness of hunger replaced now by the heaviness of rest. The room breathes in rhythm with the fire, expansion, contraction, the gentle exhale of life continuing despite all. Beyond the walls, the snow quiets everything. Even the trees seem to listen. In the quiet that follows, there is no sound but the pulse of breath and the soft whisper of cooling coals. The bread, the bark, the fire, the earth, all are part of the same slow endurance. They have outlasted storms before, and they will again. The world does not pity the hungry. It steadies them. It teaches them to find sustenance in what remains, to take comfort in the taste of survival itself. When the fire fades completely and the night grows still, the body relaxes into the same stillness. There is no fear now, only calm. The scent of wood lingers on the air, the faint sweetness of smoke wrapping the room in its quiet warmth. Outside, frost glitters faintly under the thin moon. Inside, the air is soft and heavy, filled with the gentle rhythm of sleep. You breathe with it, slow and deep, as the world settles into its long patience once more. The night holds steady, the silence is whole. Every hardship has softened into memory. The breath of those who came before seems to linger in the room, woven into the air like invisible thread. They too once ate bark bread, once waited for spring, once slept beside the fading fire. And now their endurance has become yours. You rest in the same stillness, the same patient rhythm. The fire may fade, but warmth remains. In the walls, in the air, in the long memory of the world itself. Sleep comes easily now, slow, calm and deep, like the forest breathing, like the earth remembering that life endures through even the longest winter. The night at last becomes complete. All the sounds that filled the long hours, fire breathing softly, wind brushing the thatch, footsteps fading into soil, have grown quiet. What remains is the deep rhythm of rest, the pulse of the world settling into itself. In this stillness, everything learned through the day seems to fold together. The ember carried through rain, the smoke that preserved food, the scent of herbs that guarded sleep, the hands that shaped walls from earth, the bark that became bread when all else was gone. Each act was small, almost invisible, yet together they formed a world sustained by patience rather than power. Nothing in it rushed, nothing demanded glory. It was a civilization of care, measured not by its monuments, but by how gently it continued. If you listen now, beneath the hush of night, you can still feel that endurance breathing through time. The homes are gone, the fire's long cold, but the rhythm remains. Every gesture of preservation, every sound of quiet labor still echoes in the ways we live, in the ways we rest. The people of that distant world built more than shelter. They built a kind of understanding that life endures not through conquest, but through balance. Clay held coolness, smoke held memory, and the smallest flame guarded warmth against the endless dark. They did not fight the world, they moved with it. They learned to trust what they could not see, the slow rise of bread from bark, the murmur of wind through willow, the steady return of dawn after each long night. And now, as the story fades, you too are part of that same quiet order. The world outside the window sleeps beneath stars that have seen every generation come and go. The air carries the faint scent of earth, the same that filled those ancient homes. You breathe it in, slow and steady, and feel yourself drift toward the same calm that carried them through winters and storms. There is no need for thought now, no need for struggle. The long patience of life continues in you as softly as breath, as constant as time. The fire dims, the night deepens, and everything that once labored finally rests. The world holds steady once more, unchanged, eternal, and kind. Sleep comes quietly, like the closing of a door, leaving behind only warmth and the gentle knowledge that endurance itself is a form of peace.